Words are little bodies, and each word must have a soul in it. And if we are able to find the soul within words, then we experience their meaning. And out of this soul power also, we come a little nearer to the understanding of the common needs of mankind. We want to begin, therefore, by pointing out that Zen is not essentially a religion. It is not a philosophy. It is not a science. To the Zen master, Zen is only one thing: an immediate experience. It can occur to a person of any belief, so long as that person is sincere. It cannot be conjured into existence by any ulterior motive. It is not a product of intellectualism, nor is it assured by the absence of intellectualism. This interior experience is perhaps best approached not dogmatically, but by trying to convey overtones. From the beginning, Zen has been a discipline of overtones. For 1,000 years it was perpetuated without a textbook. It is not given from master to disciple by lectures or orations. It is the silent communication of heart to heart, of soul to soul. Now, Zen is not essentially different from many of the great convictions of mankind, but perhaps it is the most completely organized expression of these convictions. It draws its authority from many sources. It brings them together and justifies them from the common experience of human beings seeking peace and hope and justice and integrity. In order, therefore, that we get some basic concept of our principle and be a little more familiar with the basic ideas, we will start with an old familiar figure to most thoughtful persons: grand old, homely old Socrates. This great Athenian commoner, one of the most beloved leaders of man's mental life, was once discoursing with his disciples concerning the mystery of the human soul. And to explain his discourse, he showed his disciples an empty glass. And then he took a handful of earth, and he placed the handful of earth in the glass. Then he took a pitcher of water, and he poured water upon the earth until the glass was filled. As a result, the glass was murky and disturbed, and there was a strange, muddy confusion of water and earth. Then Socrates took the glass in his hand and continued to shake it violently. The more he shook it, the more confused the elements became, until it was impossible to tell one from the other. Then Socrates said, "The earth is the body of man. This water is the symbol of his soul. By keeping this glass continually agitated, I will make certain that there can be no separation between the body and the soul. I shall keep the soul obscure with the mud of body. I will keep the body riled and agitated, until by this continual agitation I have achieved continual confusion. This is the state of man. By the continual agitation of his mind and his emotions, his inner life is continuously disturbed. It is impossible to discern the better part of him from the worst part. And when he thinks of himself, he does not know whether he thinks of the best part or the worst part. Now, how shall we clarify this? How shall we establish a discipline by means of which these two elements will be resolved to their natural relationships, and the obvious release of soul from the obscurity of matter can be accomplished? He said, my disciples, we cannot achieve this, but it can be achieved because nature has so ordained that it should be achieved. We accomplish our end not by our own effort, but by following nature. He said, I will now place this glass with its riled contents here on the table. And now, my disciples, we shall discourse of many subjects, and we shall leave the glass to itself. A little later he turned, and he spoke to his disciples again, and he said, now look at the glass. I have no longer agitated it. I have no longer kept it artificially confused. Therefore you will perceive that the lower parts have separated of themselves from the higher part. The earth has again fallen to the bottom. The upper water, signifying the soul, is clear again, and it is now possible to perceive the two parts in their proper and natural states. This has been accomplished by one thing only. I have stopped agitating the bottle. I have left it in peace. I have bestowed quietude upon it. I have no longer blown upon it with my thoughts and feelings. I have no longer confused it with hope and despair. I have simply allowed it to be quiet. And out of this stillness, nature has perfected its work. So this is a concept which we find in Socratic philosophy, namely that man must continually artificially agitate himself in order to remain ignorant. The moment he stops being ignorant or trying to be ignorant, he will gradually become wise, because this is the way of nature. This is what he was intended to accomplish, but he has never kept still long enough to enjoy his birthright. Though far on the other side of the world, about nearly 600 years before the beginning of the Christian era, the great Indian philosopher Gautama Buddha sat down quietly on an old boulder on the side of a mountain which was called the Vulture's Peak. And here he discoursed with his disciples in the way in which it was done in those times, where the wise man sat by the side of the road, and those who honored gathered around him to listen to his words. And as they were quietly discoursing there, a farmer, a rustic, a man of no particular abilities, but with a great respect for the teacher, came to bring him an offering. He brought the only offering he had. He had taken from a pool not far away a beautiful lotus plant, and he brought this and he laid it in the lap of the Buddha. And Gautama looked down upon the lotus plant very quietly, and he said nothing. And everyone remained silent for a long time. And then one of the disciples rose and came and knelt before the teacher and said, Master, I have received the doctrine. And Gautama said, It is well, my son. Tell me what you have received. The disciple said, I have received it, Master, but I cannot tell you what it is. The Master said, That is good. You have received the doctrine. And out of this incident arose the foundation of Zen. Now that which had been placed in the lap of Buddha was a simple plant that had grown in a pool. This plant consisted of three parts: a leaf, a blossom, and a bud. And the strange symbolism of this trinity was to influence half the world more than any other symbolism that has ever been given to man. And in the philosophy of Zen, we find mingled many thoughts from ancient China and other parts of the world. Nearly 1,500 years ago, there flourished in India one of the most extraordinary institutions of learning of which we have any record. It was a great university where more than 25,000 students gathered to be instructed by more than 1,200 teachers. In this university was taught all arts and sciences, medicine and law, astronomy and architecture. Here also was taught all literature and all history, great systems of morality and ethics. And it is reported that in the 5th century AD, in the University of Nalanda in India, Christianity was taught in India as comparative religion. Now we have no record of this, and the great university perished with the rise of Islam in India. But sometime while it was at its height, in the 5th or 6th century, there graduated from it a most peculiar man. He was a very heavy-set, broad-shouldered, athletic type of person, with an enormous face and very large eyes. He was perhaps a considerably exaggerated counterpart of dear old Socrates himself, and just about as handsome. This man was a blue-eyed Brahmin, and he wore a heavy red cloak, and he had a gristly beard and large golden rings in his ears. He had beetling brows and a bald head, and he was a strange, stern man. But he felt a call within himself, and he went forth out of India, and he made the long and dangerous journey to China. And there he remained and taught. His name was Bodhidarman, sometimes also called Daruma. And perhaps many of you have seen a picture of him or a likeness of him sometime. Have you ever been in a toy store and seen a funny little red doll that looked like an egg, with a face painted on the front, and every time you tipped it over it bounced up again? You couldn't tip it over because it was weighted in the bottom. This is Daruma, a favorite with children throughout Asia. This fact that you cannot tip him over is part of his philosophy. That he should be a toy is also part of his philosophy. Because there was one thing that Daruma did not want, and that is that anyone should venerate him. If they cared for him at all, he wanted them to love him as a child will love a doll or a toy. He wanted everyone who saw him to laugh. And with his general makeup, it was not impossible, because he was a rather humorous-looking person. About the 7th century of the Christian era, the teaching of this man reached Japan, where the doctrine of Zen, as we now know it, took root, even more firmly than in any other part of Asia. And because it appealed to a certain basic simplicity in the Japanese consciousness, it flourished there and became one of the most powerful forces in the cultural development of its people. Now we may say, why should we worry about Zen over here? We have our own philosophies, we have our own ideas. I think the answer to that is the same as to ask the question, why should we listen to our parents? We are young and up and coming. Why should we listen to other people? Young folks generally do not wish to listen. And it becomes necessary for them to go through a number of unhappy experiences before they discover that perhaps their parents knew something. In the world of thought and philosophy, in a wonderful way, all that has gone before constitutes an elder. We can profit by the experiences of the past, because our own ways of life are changing. And somewhere in this world, peoples have gone through all the experiences that we go through. Sometimes they went through these experiences long ago, and their adventures are half forgotten. But by degrees we are realizing that this is truly one planet, that this planet is inhabited by one humanity, and that from the beginning of time this humanity has had a wonderful capacity to get into trouble. Also all over the world there have arisen teachers, wonderful leaders, idealists, dreamers, saviors, sages, and saints, who have sought to help man. Though every type of humanity was essentially different, teachers could only help their own. But while races look differently and have different languages and different habitats, the essential problems of man are universal. A man is still hungry in any part of the earth. He can still be broken-hearted in any part of the earth. He can suffer war and pillage anywhere. He knows age, sickness, and death, regardless of country or land or language. Thus, in the great values, we are one people. And we are beginning to realize that as it is nice for us to have dishes, perhaps that were made in Denmark, or buy good woolens that are made in Scotland, or enjoy various art treasures and commodities from other parts of the world. So we should have a free exchange of ideas in order that each individual may enjoy the best of what the world knows. And any less adequate attitude is a prejudice of some kind. And prejudice doesn't help very much in time of trouble. Zen, under several different names, then, represents the convictions of many people, all involved in this wonderful mystery of the lotus blossom, the bud, and the leaf. So we will pause for a moment to try to understand this trinity. And in Asia, these three parts of the lotus symbolize the three parts of the universe with which man is concerned. The lotus flower is heaven, the leaf is earth, the bud is man. And the ancients devised this great trinity of heaven, earth, and man. This triad finds man suspended between heaven and earth. We remember the words of Goethe in his wonderful drama of Faust, where he says that there are two spirits within himself. One to the heaven aspires, and the other in the earth suspires. Heaven, earth, and man represent a strange, unbalanced balance. It is everywhere in Oriental art. It has come to us in the designs on beautiful bowls and cups. It is embroidered in fine silk. It is woven into brocades. It has returned to our Western life through flower arrangement, for Oriental flower arrangement is always the same: the blossom, the leaf, and the bud. Now, from this triad, China developed a very ancient doctrine which we know as Taoism, pronounced as though it was spelled with a D, but actually spelled with a T. So it is spelled Taoism and pronounced Taoism. Now, in this doctrine, heaven was the most important of all factors. Confucius and Lao Tzu have left us wonderful stories about the mystery of heaven and earth. Heaven is the eternal emperor. Imperial heaven is the ruler of all things. Confucius says, heaven bestows, man receives. Everywhere in Eastern thinking, heaven moves all other things. And by a strange and wonderful alchemical marriage, heaven and earth were united. And the son of heaven and earth was man. And in man is heaven, his upper part. And in man is earth, his lower part. If man inclines himself to the earth, he becomes a materialist. He becomes wrought in mortal concerns. If he elevates himself toward heaven, he ascends to his own spiritual source. He becomes one with the principle of good, which is real everywhere in the universe. So all nobility causes man to rise to heaven. All selfishness impels him to fall back again into the earth. And because man has heaven and earth within himself, his nature is like the glass of water in the story of Socrates. By his doubts, he obscures heaven. By his various selfish and unreasonable actions, he keeps confusion constantly within his own nature. He has a little of hope, which is heaven, and a little of fear, which is earth. He has a little of good, which is heaven, a little of ill, which is earth. In him all polarities and opposites, a struggle for dominion over the mystery of his own nature. Now we are also told that heaven is motion, life. And the ancient Chinese scholar, looking out into the sky, saw forever the pageantry of stars, and he saw the planets moving along the golden road. And he saw the great Emperor of heaven, veiled in his infinite robes. He saw the mystery beyond mysteries, and he adored heaven. And to symbolize this, he made a flat disc of jade, about the size of a dinner plate and 1/4 of an inch thick. And in the center of this disc he put a circular opening. Now the circle became the symbol of heaven, because it was the sign of eternity. But man could not worship heaven in the form of a piece of jade. So he made an opening in the center of the jade where there was nothing. And when he wished to speak to heaven, he whispered into the hole in the center of the jade. Because that which was real he could make no picture of. He could not worship any form or likeness, because heaven was universal. Heaven was life itself. And they asked an old Chinese philosopher once, what was the shape of heaven? And he replied, what is the shape of water? If you put water in a square container, water is square. If you put it in a round bottle, it is round. If you put it in a flat dish, it is shallow. If you put it in a thin vase, it is deep. It is all shapes to all things, yet of itself it is beyond shape. This is truth, which can appear in all appearances, yet in its own nature is beyond all appearances. And then the Chinese also said there is something about this heaven that is like water. Water is distinguished from earth. Again, Socrates' symbol of the soul as water, differentiated from earth. And the Chinese said, this water is like Tao, or eternity. Let us explain then this mystery. For behold, the sun gathers up water from the sea and lifts it into the air, and it becomes clouds. And in the form of clouds it is carried to the mountains. And on the mountains it becomes rain and falls again. And it falls to form little rivulets, and these come together to make brooks. And the brooks in turn unite to make rivers. And the rivers flow down the mountains and across the plains. And men live by the shores of the river, for this is the great Yangtze, the mother of waters. And they take their life from the river, and they build their homes beside it, and it waters their fields, and they sail upon it, and they catch fish from it, and they wash their clothes in it, and they drink it, and they bury their dead in it, and the sea keeps right on moving, this great water, flowing forever. And finally the water, in the end, returns to the sea from which it came. This is the great cycle of life. This is Tao. the principle of life which sustains all things, which flows forever from itself to itself. And along the way, all creatures live dependent upon it, live nourished by it, live forever in the presence of its symbolism, live forever without understanding. This mystery, then, has something to do with consciousness. It has something to do that is very deep indeed with the life and experience of the human being. Now this Tao is very much like Zen, and it is Zen in turn which lines with Confucius to produce what may be considered the right or proper code for human life. Confucius says that the proper person is the superior man. Now this sounds at first a little arrogant, but as we understand his meaning more, we begin to find that he has made a very constructive and important statement. What is a superior man? According to Confucius, a superior man is simply a human being who has lost the capacity to perform an inferior action. Now this, of course, is a hard capacity to lose, and most folks don't make it. But it is still a very interesting thought. On one occasion, when Diogenes was speaking in the Athenian Forum, a Greek soldier who disagreed with him stood on a terrace above and spat on his head. Now this was quite a bad moment even for a philosopher. Diogenes looked up to see whether it was raining or not, and discovering the source of the insult, smiled rather benignly. He said, "You know, I have an idea that about this time I should be angry with you, but I have forgotten how." This is to a measure the concept of Confucius. The superior person is one in whose nature heaven leads. The superior person is the one in whose consciousness heaven flows. He is the one who is a receptacle or vessel for heaven, and has only one sincere and earnest desire, that he may express life, and that through him this life may flow to bring nourishment like the Yangtze River to all the millions who thirst after righteousness and of goodness and of right principles. So this superior being is the one in whose life beauty and truth have taken over. It is a person who has achieved the great quietude so that he may listen to the voice of heaven. Lao Tzu says, 3 kinds of men write poems. One for gain, so many dollars a line. One for fame, so that his name will be in print. The third, simply because he cannot help writing poetry. The third one alone is a poet. And this is the same concept, this motion from within, this motion of eternity conquering time as an experience of human consciousness. So with perhaps these few little introductory scattered remarks, we can come more directly to the very heart of the problem of Zen. Perhaps we can now appreciate that Zen is non-creedal, that it has nothing to do with names or places or persons primarily. It has to do with something that every human heart must some way learn to understand and apply. Let us then try to find a few simple things out of this Eastern psychology, by means of which we can help to organize our Western way of life. One thing that I think Zen does for us is to live life out of historical context. Up to the present time, many persons have lived by history alone. Also, they have worshipped history. They have not realized one of the principles that Zen points out. This heaven, the open blossom of the lotus, this ever-flowing imperial sky, has within itself the locked mystery of all dimensions, up and down, in and out, forward and backward, yesterday and tomorrow, time and eternity, beginning and end, are all locked within the mystery of heaven. And in this locking of all dimensions, the Zen thinker points out that heaven itself is superior to all these things, that they exist because of it. It is the master. They are merely expressions or avenues for its expression. In common parlance, the life of man is divided into three parts: yesterday, today, and tomorrow. Zen points out, however, that the only one of those parts that is real is the heaven part. And that heaven part is now. There is no time in all the world but now. What we call the past is simply man remembering the past now. All that we have of the future is man's hope for the future, which he is hoping now. The individual, however, has made now negative. He has permitted the past to flow in and fill the now. One of the rewards of this is to be a psychotic. He has no longer the power to make any decision now. He has mortgaged now to yesterday. Plato said the same thing when he made the remark, "The living are ruled by the dead." You are a living person. You are living now. Are you ruled by yesterday? Are you tied into a strange complex because of memory? Are you doing things today simply because you've always done them that way? Is today overshadowed by regret, by remorse? Are you trying to live today by the rule of yesterday? Are you completely historical? If you are, you will probably ultimately become completely hysterical. Is today merely a moment in which you are trying to get over yesterday? Is today a measure measured by yesterday? Are you still carrying the prejudice of yesterday? Are you still making the mistakes of yesterday? Are you still trying to live by a code of conduct that was enough for yesterday, but may not be enough for today? Are you bringing forward the hates of yesterday? Are you bringing forward the gloom and the unpleasantness and the fear of yesterday? Is actually your present mind a haunted house ruled over by spirits and ghosts who rattle chains all night? Actually, is your sleep and your dream merely a way in which yesterday escapes from psychic symbolism to plague today? Are you therefore a servant to a series of dead things? Everything that you did yesterday is dead. It lives only in your memory. And if by some strange reason you develop amnesia, all of this death, all of this past ceases to exist. Most people consider such amnesia a disaster, and yet we go to hospitals and have shock therapy to create it in an emergency, because we find that some people simply cannot continue to live with yesterday without finally falling to pieces now. This yesterday problem is a very big one. Now, as a compensation for yesterday, which is full of its regrets, We have tomorrow, and tomorrow is the Shangri-La we live for now. In tomorrow, everything is going to come out all right. But don't forget that today was tomorrow yesterday. Don't forget that this endless motion of time is causing us forever to transmute tomorrows into yesterdays. They go by so fast that the only part of this wonderful and rapid motion that gets no attention is now. This now is lost in the rapid motion of things. Dashing after tomorrow, trying to get over yesterday, we have no immediate focus whatever. We are trying to escape in one direction, toward, and in the other direction, from. But Zen points out that no matter how fast you run, you can never outrun yourself. Yesterday was miserable because of you. Tomorrow will be miserable because of you. For wherever you go and whatever happens, you must live with yourself. You can't do anything about the self of yesterday, and it's a rather abstract job to try to do anything about the self of tomorrow. But the key is now. This is the moment in which you can do anything. But you say the moment is gone. Even as we speak, now becomes the past. That may be true, but there is one difference. Time moves on, but the now stays with us. Man is a creature that can only live now. Everything else is a psychological emergency. The individual is only part of the past because he believes it. He is only non-contemporary because he binds himself to something outside of himself, time. And time becomes the greatest tyrant in his life. He cannot escape the tyranny of the passing hour. So Zen takes this simple attitude. The world around us is not an illusion. You can reach out and touch a chair. The chair is there. There's no doubt about it. But some way the chair is not real. The chair belongs to a world of things. Man does not. Man is a life. Man is a principle. Put him in a square bottle and he is square. Put him in a round bottle and he is round. But man has an existence apart from square and round. Of himself, he is always himself. This is his hope. His great hope, therefore, is to extricate himself from the curious dilemma of his own thinking, of his own mind, of the burdens which he has cast upon himself. Now, how are we going to get the individual free from yesterday and tomorrow so that he can have a life? Now, some people say, well, if he gets away from yesterday and tomorrow, he's going to be very improvident. He's going to lose all his moral and ethical background. He is going to become a very dangerous citizen. Because after all, we need the moral instruction of the past. We also need the vivid hope of the future to keep us moving. This is not as true as it seems to be. The only reason we lean upon the past and the future is because the present is a vacuum. Make the present right. That which is good in the past will live, but the rest will cease. Make the present right, and that which is necessary to the future will come, and that which is unnecessary will not appear to plague us. So the great problem is this problem of immediate rightness. The next point that Zen would like to emphasize is the fact that according to history, and to nearly all historical circumstances, man is a victim. He is a victim of his time. Most persons wish they had lived some other time when things were much better. They will always wish this. Sometimes they look back on the dear old, good old times, which were probably just as troublesome as now, but in a little different way. We are always looking back to the peace of a golden age and forward to some paradise to come. The individual, therefore, feels a tremendous sense of bondage. He cannot change his world, therefore he must suffer with it, is the common attitude. He tries desperately to be a little better than those around him. No one pays much attention to him. In fact, he's probably cheated occasionally as a result of his improved intentions. Zen would point out, however, that a man is not cheated because he's better. He's cheated because he's foolish. And improvement in morale or improvement in integrity, these have nothing to do with gullibility. In fact, it is the individual who tries to be intensely practical and to keep all the taboos and policies and practices of his time is cheated the most. And he is finally, because he is so practical, cheated out of life itself. This is not the answer. Actually, Zen points out that no matter how corrupt the world becomes, how selfish and stupid everyone else may be, each individual can be as wise, as happy, and as good as he wishes to be.